Well, welcome everybody to another Tree Actions, the Human Forestry Podcast. And our guest today with Tony and I is none other than the professor, the good Professor Pricklethorn. Welcome to the show, Professor.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on. What an honor and a thrill.
Thanks for being here.
Brought a friend.
Oh yeah. So does that friend travel with you regularly, Professor?
Yeah, he's a green companion that I take around, and can't get enough of them at times, right?
Well, Professor, we always ask people how they got interested in trees, and maybe you could take us back to where the good professor was born and how he got started doing his stuff with the trees.
Right. Well, my roots, I started as a wee sapling in Cobourg, Ontario. Born and raised there, beautiful little town. It's a real arboriculture hotbed with a bunch of companies you guys probably already know that work out of Cobourg. My mom was a green thumb, and you're going to find this hard to believe, but as a wee child, I was a bit of a handful. So I was known to be grounded a few times, and she would always kind of commute the sentence if I did some community service in the backyard, like pruning shrubs or whatever. And she'd always be like, once the forsythia are done flowering, you can prune them, but take out the old canes, and move on now to the quince. We're going to shape it up a bit. So I got to learn my trees and shrubs at a young age. Then in high school, I worked at a Sheridan Nursery Tree Farm, budding, grafting. Went on to Humber College. Hung around the third year, did the arboriculture program there, and I haven't looked back. And trees have always been in my life. So I just love sharing the passion and watching people that, particularly the students, when I talk about trees, kind of the learning bulb go off over their head when they're like, oh, that's a good point. Or they connect the dots on, little factoids and stuff that's all relevant to all of us.
Well, Professor, what aspects of trees do you feel is most important to try to convey in your lessons when you're with children? What lessons are the most important ones you try to teach them about trees, and how do you do that?
Well, it's two different things, because I always say I always got to be prepared with the est answers, the biggest, the smallest, the oldest. So they always want to know the est list, right? So I got to nail that down. But I think the thing that I try to convey to them the most is just all of the visible and invisible things that trees give us. The tangible stuff we all know, the fruit, food, and medicine and lumber. But then, it's the connection with people, that how they help our mental health, and just being around them just really makes us feel better. And the fact that they're good for our physical health, forest walks and that. So I try to get them to look at trees in a different light, that they're not just kind of some green appliance in our backyard in the park or whatever, but they really, really help us. And that's why we have to flip it around and help the trees, because they help us. So let's turn it around and help the trees.
Okay. And for when you have a young audience, that is quite dependent, like a young tree, on care and attention. How can young people, how do you impart to them that they can help trees?
I have a very simple list, especially in the elementary school. I say, number one, don't break branches, injure the trunk, or cut roots. And if you see somebody doing that, speak up, because it's going to really harm and set back the tree. The other thing I do is I mentioned about watering small trees, is that trees need CO2. They need some water, they need minerals, and they need sunlight. That's the big three, I guess. And but the thing is, there's always going to be sunlight. There's always going to be CO2. But with the little trees in this day and age, the thing that they're going to be looking for the most is water. So get at the school ground or whatever, you see a young tree, get a pail, a 5-gallon pail, give it some water, help it out.
Excellent. So I'm curious what has been your what do the children teach you about trees?
Oh man, they sometimes, the older we get, sometimes I guess the narrower our vision gets, but they help me pull back the blinders because I always ask kind of what a tree is or what a tree means to them. And sometimes I get the most incredible answers. I get like, Christmas. They say, oh, that's what their tree means to them. And I'm like, yeah, good point. Or
Yeah.
love and family. The family tree is like figuratively and literally in many children's minds, that whole concept of the family tree. And I find that, the more that I talk to them, the more that trees tend to give them peace and a surety of stability. They're always there. All the, we see all these memes and stuff with all the, trees give us roots and anchor us, and all the 10 different things that metaphors of trees. But I think for
Right.
children, they remind me that keep it simple, and just be aware of the trees around you and realize that these trees are really helping us, and we have to take care of them. That's where professionals like you guys come in, because any time that you have something of value, you want to have it looked after professionally and with care and knowledge.
Right. Excellent. Well, I don't know. I would imagine that some of our listeners will have seen you, at a show or a conference, or maybe making a presentation somewhere. I've seen you at several different events over the years, but I'm wondering if there's a way you could give us give us a presentation, like for those that have never seen you or heard you. Maybe you could just pretend that we're your audience of, we're a young class of elementary children, and the professor's gonna lay it on us.
Well, let me give you the auctioneer fast forward voice here, because it's usually about a 35-minute presentation. But typically what I do is I start out with, what do trees give us? And we kind of go back and forth on that, and, again, the tangible things. But I find I spend a bit of time on what I call the tree warm and fuzzies, where I talk a little bit about forest bathing and, how trees interact with humans and how they make us feel. But then I kind of end by saying, well, it's not warm and fuzzy because it's science. It's just not touchy-feely, all that. It's science, and trees make us feel better. And then from there I go on and I talk about kind of being an arborist and what it is to be an arborist. And that when we went to school to become an arborist, one of our guiding principles is to plant the right tree in the right place. So I go through all of that, planting the right tree, and I give some pretty cool examples of that. And from there I get serious. I get really serious, and I pose the question, what are trees made of? And you wouldn't believe some of the answers, and some of them I'm blown away by. I'm like, wow, we got a U of T, forestry student here today. Like, how did you get in here? Right. So then we kind of go through that. And then we do a role play of photosynthesis, where I have somebody bright, usually is the sun, and then I get somebody tall to be the tree full of chlorophyll. And then I get a little guy to be like the water, little guy, little girl. And then somebody's got to be carbon dioxide. Mix that all together with the sun, right? What do we get? In the tree, we get the glucose is produced. So that's always somebody that's sweet. And
Right.
then the kind of the piece de resistance is oxygen. And
Right.
that's kind of it. And it's always a bit tricky because I was in Coburg Library last week, and I had the sunshine, and she's like, I don't want to be the sunshine. And she kind of laughed. And usually that happens to carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide, we need it, love it, but we just don't want too much of it, right? But usually I don't want to be carbon dioxide. And then I got to, it's always awkward. But everybody likes being sugar. Everybody likes being oxygen, so, and they're okay. The guy's okay with being the tree as well. So, but, and then I kind of end by, these little things of helping trees that we see in our neighborhood. What we can do is, don't put chains or stuff around them, or don't rack your bike up against them, and kind of help all you can with these little trees, especially. And then I have a little pledge that we do, a Pricklethorn pledge, and we do that. And then we end with a really cool song, and it's kind of catchy. Kind of goes, you may have heard this before. All we are saying is give trees a chance. So that's kind of like, that's it in an acorn nutshell. And had rave reviews. I I even did University Côte d'Azur in Nice, France. I was there, and that was kind of funny because just about before I was going to present, the professors kind of kittled around me and kind of circled me, and they said, just remind us again where you had your tenure, which academia university that you got your PhD. And I'm like, ooh. I thought I said PH3. Did I mention PhD? So then I had to walk through the steps of Dr. Seuss really wasn't a doctor, Captain Kangaroo really wasn't a captain, and then Professor Pricklethorn, PH3. So yeah, that was a little awkward right before I went on.
Right. I wonder, Professor, how you could, it's interesting. How is it at such a young age, do you think, that children can already identify with the sugar and the sweet and the air versus, the oxygen or the carbon dioxide and or the staticness of a tree, and do you tie it in with, because you couldn't have sugar without the carbon dioxide, and it's also vital.
Exactly. And it's a tough concept when you start talking about invisible gases. And
Right.
I think carbon dioxide, let's face it, gets a bad rap, right? Because, global warming, and we're creating so much but I say we put it in our soda pop. You open like ginger ale or Coke, and that's carbonated. That's carbon.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
it is around us, and we're probably putting out a little too much, but trees absolutely love it. And so it is a tough concept to get this invisible dun 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 gas. And but I think they get it. Like I've had kids come back to me and they said, you know what, we were walking home from your presentation and we saw the sidewalk buckled up because they planted a big tree too close to the sidewalk. And right tree, right place. So and
Right.
I get all sorts of little notes and letters that make me feel really good that they connected the dots. I can see the eureka moment where they're like, yes, yeah.
Wow. So does the professor ever get up in trees or ever spend time in the canopy of trees on ropes or anything like that?
No, I used to quite a bit. Yeah, I had my fair share of like ice storms back in the day, but I am a solid kind of a taut line hitch guy or a Blake hitch guy. But I look at you guys today with holy Dr. Gadget. You got you got more carabiners and flip flop zigzag polywags on your belt there, and I'm just in awe. Like I'm in, my day was just like shinny and like one lanyard. I was when I first started, we still had the tar buckets on the sashes, right? And they would call them shiners. You left a couple of shiners up there, right? So back up you go, and you learn. You only did that once or twice, and off you went up to paint the shiners. And I know when we left that, thankfully tree research, we should talk about how important that is, because if it wasn't for tree research, we'd probably still be painting the stupid cuts with tar and stuff. But I was back in the day when my test was to make a saddle out of a double bowline. You had to make your own saddle, and you had to get yourself up the tree and kind of do the shimmy up. You go, and if you got up there, they're like, okay, you're good, let's go. So, but I am just the leaps and bounds, and it's due to research, because research keeps us progressive. It keeps us moving ahead. And so I'm a really big believer in this year will be my 20th consecutive tour de trees, Reno to San Francisco in September. So I'm a big supporter.
So the professor rides the bicycle as well.
You got it. Yeah.
So I'm curious. I didn't realize that you had experience with going all the way back to the pruning pan, and even a bowling on a bite harness and a climbing and working that way. What I've always, we've had several people on the show that remember it, but not as much where they've specifically said they actually did it. And I've always curious, what like how much of a nuisance it actually was, just from a practical standpoint of climbing a tree and painting while you prune. That had to have been a little bit messy sometimes.
Oh yeah, no, it would drip down your pant. Your gloves were full. And then certain temperatures, it was just like, it'd be like, closer to zero, and it'd just be like, uh, and on your rope. And
Yeah.
I broke in, so I started climbing in like 78, and they were just introducing Arborplex. Like that was like, whoa, revolutionary. When we had that. And I remember we would bring '08s up the tree, '08s up a tree for like pruning cuts. And no kickback device, just rattly old, and he'd be like, start it on the ground, and the buddy would start it on the ground, and kind of the thing would be kind of like shutting around, and you'd get your cut done, and then shut it off and send it back down. But yeah, no, it was, and one lanyard. Typically, you only had one lanyard.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, boosting your hook through with a pole pruner as you went up. No, it was some of the stuff I look back, I'm thinking, wow. Then, as I say, then I see people today with like, $5,000 worth of equipment hanging from their belt, just like the MacGyver climber, right? So, but it's progression, right? And a lot of this is done by, again, research, trial and error, best practices. Where would we be without best practices and having industry associations to share them? And that's it. They get shared in every corner now due to the range of our different associations. So yeah, it was
we all know
quite
that
something.
we all know that we have Dr. Shigo to thank for the abolishment of our pruning paint, but
Right.
what was your involvement, or did the professor have any interactions with Dr. Shigo at all? Or
I saw him speak way back, and I remember Code It, right? That was the whole, that was the whole deal, and it was like revolutionary. You're like, what do you mean by, compartmentalization of disease in wood, right? Yeah, it's in trees, and so that was revolutionary. And trying to think what other stuff that changed a little bit. Topping was done a little bit back then. Like, I mean,
okay,
like some poplars and that, we would just, the guy at the ground would yell, there you go, right by your hands, and then you'd lean back and get the '08 up there. And
yeah, and that topping was something that Shigo kind of exposed the damage that it did to trees. But how does the professor bring that in with his young students? Is pruning something that you talk about, or do you think that, like, because topping doesn't seem to be quite as prevalent anymore, but it still does get done?
right. Well, and I think what I do is I pull it back to professional tree care. Like, if you want to get something done right, you have to have professionals. You don't want people experimenting on your trees. You want progressive best practices done on your trees that we love. And even in municipal towns and that, you don't want just the guy out there running around with a pickup truck and the chainsaw, just having a tree cutter. I call them tree cutters. And
Right.
so you just don't want that type of person around your trees. You got to protect. They're an asset, right? And a lot of them, you think, get off my property, that's my tree. Well, no, your tree is benefiting the whole community. So,
Right.
Whether it be wildlife habitat or like, the air cleansing qualities it brings, and tranquility, and the greening of the community and the canopy, it's trees are kind of like a community asset, even though they may sit on your property. That old get off my
Right.
lawn guy, right?
So community stewardship is something that you foster in the young minds, as well as even professionalism.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, it's kind of like being part of a team or a very worthy cause. Everybody wants to have a role in something that's worthy and fulfilling. And I try and foster with the kids. Like, I actually even talk about a careers in arboriculture, because again, when I started, it was kind of like just one stream. It was, you either climbed trees or you didn't. And if you didn't, you
Right.
kind of probably stuck on the chipper the rest of your life. But nowadays the scope of work is so amazing. Like there's data collectors, there's consultants, there's people that do the integrated pest management, there's estimators. The scope of work in arboriculture now is like, I don't know, 100-fold from when I first started. Like, and I often talk about that, and I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say there's always work to be found in arboriculture. I kind of have my tentacles out there, and I always see like companies looking for help, companies hiring, companies, wanting to expand and need more and more and more. Right. So, if you want a really good career, I tell them, and it's a very noble career that you're doing good. Your big picture is you're helping the planet and you're helping people. Trees help people. So, again, a very noble professional career to go into is arboriculture. And, let's start them young.
So you've been doing the community outreach, so to speak, with young people for 20 years now?
Yeah. I kind of started that end of it. I was the park supervisor on Toronto Island for about 25 years. And there's a school there. There's a little community on the island. I call it our Toronto's little Key West, kind of a funky little community. And there's a school there. And I would go to the school like on Arbor Day or Earth Day. And I'd just be like, hey, kids, I'm Warren Hostleton. And they would be like nodding off. I had good things to say. But then one time I came in as Professor Pricklethorn. And I amped it up. I animated it. I got a lot more interactive, and I think the message somehow stuck more. So I started doing that at the Toronto Island Public School, and then I went to a few events here and there, and then kind of the teaching network in Toronto kind of heard about me, and then I got picked up by the Toronto District School Board as under contract as an external presenter. So I'm with them. And then, of course, our good friends at ISA Ontario helped get me around to different communities and events and schools in Ontario. So ISA Ontario has been a tremendous help launching Pricklethorn.
Yeah, and haven't you gone to the urban forestry conferences as well?
I've been quite a few of them. And I'm trying to think, Indianapolis, I went down there by the IAA, Indianapolis Arborists Association, actually sponsored me to come down, and as a legacy within the community where the conference was, sent me to some schools close by. So that's a win-win.
Nice.
Yeah, no, it was really fantastic. Yeah, so trees have been very, very good to me.
So I'm just trying to. So really, that's where the professor originally was conceived, is on you're from the island.
Yeah, I worked there for many years. I will say one of my mentors that absolutely shaped my destiny is a gentleman by the name of Timmy Womack. You probably know that name. Yeah, Timmy.
Yes.
So, and he actually came to the island a couple times. So, and so many times he had some mascots with him and whatnot. So I'd be the squirrel, right? And I'm like, I was just in awe of Timmy, like how, and I'm like, we need more of this. And I think that was the eureka moment when I said, I can do this. Timmy can't be everywhere. So, enter Professor Elwood Pricklethorn.
Well, is he not in California?
Yeah, he's out of North Carolina, his home and native land.
Right.
But he spends a lot of time in California. Yeah, West Coast Arborists and their association out there. Same thing. Gets them the events and libraries and schools. And Timmy's just a dynamo. I can't speak highly enough about him.
Yeah, I think maybe we should try to reach out to him. Maybe he can do an episode as well.
Oh, he's a trip. Yeah, for sure.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
So, Professor, you said this is your 20th year riding in the Tour de Trees?
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, if you were going to give anyone advice, they'd never done it before.
Oh, boy.
How would you get ready for that event? And even if you could just describe it a little bit,
someone's
not familiar with it.
So my first one was in 2003, and I think the year before was Vancouver to Seattle, something like that. And I saw it in the Arborist News magazine or whatever, and I'm like, and I've always ridden a bike, and I'm like, oh man, I'd like to see that, or do that. But I'm going, that's so daunting. Like Vancouver, then the trip. Then next year it was Ottawa to Montreal, but the long way. So it was like Ottawa, Brockville, Kingston, across to New York State, across to Vermont, then a big circle like the back way, through upper U.S. states. So I did that. I got ready for it. I rode a lot. I used to ride to work and home on several days a week, which is probably about 25 miles each way, like urban riding right down Yonge Street, right back Yonge Street. And so I figured, 50 miles a day, then the odd Saturday, Sunday, I'd go out and do like 80 miles, a big loop or whatever. And I figured, if I can do that, it's because number one, it's not a race. You have all day.
Right.
So you're there, you got to get from A to B. You're on a really good bike. One of your strongest muscles in your body are your legs. Got to get a bit of cardio because there's different, hills and up. And so I kind of liken it to like a triangle. There's the training, the fundraising, then the actual event. So like the training is, takes a bit of time, and and I worked it into my work. So like I didn't have to set time aside. I had to get to work, drive, go train. So I said, I'm going to ride my bike. Fundraising is, it's not at all easy. People would see me coming and run, then I sort of had to wear a ski mask at night and get them as they're getting out of the car in the darkness. And they'd be like, oh, there you are. Oh, you found me. So then I would shake them down. But they honestly, a lot of all of them get the cause. They understand why it's important to fund tree research projects and education. So there's that part. And then there's the actual event. There's like getting time away from your job, figuring out, your week or so away from your family, getting there on your own dime, getting back on your own dime, getting through that week. But I tell you, it's been, I guess it's almost, I'll say it's 20 weeks I've spent on Tour de Trees, 20 weeks of my life, like, almost half a year. And some of the best people I've ever met, and I always joke, I've met people from all over the US, the UK. I could be thrown in jail somewhere in the US and I'd have one call and there would be somebody nearby that would probably pony up to get me out, I hope. But some of the best people I've met in my life have been fellow riders or people along the road on Tour de Trees. So somebody thinking about going, I would say connect with the Tree Fund. Jonathan Kane is an excellent resource there. We have a fearless leader, Paul Wood, who's been there, I think, like 19 tours, 18 tours. Before that, it was Carl Parker for a couple of years. And, there's lots of support. We support each other through fundraising. I have a few tips that I would be happy to share, and, training tips, and then the actual event. But I'll tell you, I went to go once because I saw Ottawa to Montreal. I said, I'm going to go once. I took the train down there with my bike, schlepped it down. And I said, you know what? Bucket list. I done it. Then they're like, well, next year it's Philadelphia to Pittsburgh. And then I had met a bunch of people too, right? And I'm like, oh, I got to do that. Then the next year it was like Jackson to Nashville. I got to do that. Then I forget where it was. But every time, even this year, it's like Reno to San Francisco's Half Moon Bay. And I'm like, oh, I know the California guys. I got to respect them and go do it. So I don't know when I'm going to put the brakes on it. You may see me on an electric bike with a walker and a really long cord on the back of the bike or whatever. But I just keep going. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't.
I've been thinking about doing it, and every time you do talk about it, I get inspired. But one thing I'm wondering about is the bike itself. Like, I mean, everyone obviously brings. It's not the kind of thing you rent.
No.
You'd be quite personal to a bike. So, I mean, how the heck do you fly with a bike or get it there?
Yeah, you break it down. Though, I've kind of had the good fortune of borrowing a bike a couple of times where it's tricky, and I'm hoping to borrow a bike. But the thing is, I ride with a certain saddle, like the seat, and I take the seat with me. So,
right.
Some of the most important parts are where you connect with the bike. Your feet have good shoes, good gloves, and of course a really good seat that keeps you happy down there. which is critical, right? Yeah, it's critical.
I've heard that like the saddle sores can become a major factor if you didn't prepare.
I've seen people that didn't prepare, and that's my driving kind of incentive is if you don't prepare, you're not going to have a good time. Like like anything, if you're going to go like skiing, like a big, you're not prepared, you're not going to have a good time, or you're going on a big bit of a run or whatever. You got to be prepared, and that way you'll have a good time. But I've seen people that haven't, and they couldn't sit down. They literally couldn't sit down, and they couldn't certainly ride the next day or the day after. It takes days to get back from and there's a couple of tricks too. There's some ointments, if you know what I mean, like down low there, and no, there's a few tricks, and there's good shorts with chamois and like a little bit of padding. Get yourself a really good seat that fits, right? And there's there's a couple little cheat codes for getting through all that.
I bet. Well, no, that's really cool. I don't know that there's ever been a little mini tutorial on going on the tour, but here we have it. That's excellent.
Yeah. And the other thing is, as I said, it's not a race, it's a tour. So you usually, there's 80 riders, typically 60, 80, even 100 we've had. But in a group like that, eventually you groove into your little group of riders, somebody that's at your level, your speed, your cadence, all that. So you get into this little group, and you have your lunch and you wait for them, and you go riding or whatever. Again, you're telling stories and you're yapping back and forth, and 10 miles, 20 miles, and you're at 30, then you have a nice break, and then all of a sudden you hit lunch and you're at 50, and then you get going again, and you're at 70, and you're like, oh boy, day's pretty much cooked. I've only got a couple more or whatever. And I always find the toughest ride is if it's a 100-mile day, it's from 90 to 100. Then I end up covering my little speedometer. I don't even want to look at it. I'm like, that's the longest mile I've ever. And then I start breaking the head games. I start like 10 miles. I'm at 90. I got to go to 100. 10 miles. I do that like at a blink of an eye in the morning, like on my way to work. But I'm just like, trying to get through it and play head games and all this stuff, so it's fun.
It's seriously 100 miles a day.
Well, no, there was like back in the day, there was some 100-mile days. Typically there's always 100-mile day on every tour, because they want to give the opportunity for people that haven't ridden a true century before to ride that. So yeah, there's always at least 100-mile day. A couple of tours, there's been 2 or 3 of them.
Wow.
The longest I've had on the tour was my very first year. It was 123-mile day. We went from like Lake Placid to, I forget where it was, but that was just like, but we did it. Then you do it and you go, what else you got? Like, come on. Right. Yeah.
I'm curious what, we call it the Human Forestry Podcast, and we always ask people, what is it about trees that, obviously professionally we're involved with them, but what is it personally or mentally, socially, spiritually about them? Is there a way you can articulate what they've done for you, yourself, and can you, and how trees have impacted you?
Yeah, I would say to me, they are like the silent witnesses or guardians to, to our being, like to our day-to-day lives. So they are out there looking after us. And I think I'm always outside. I walk my dogs twice a day and through ravines and trees and past them. And I'm always kind of like giving them the nod, like, still there. And so many times I think, man, if you could talk or tell a story, the things you've probably seen, right? Even you go downtown or something in a busy lot or whatever, and all of a sudden there's a tree there, and you're like, wow, if that tree could talk and tell the story of this neighborhood. So, and then, conversely, I look at that and I say, well, that's even more reason we should look after them. Like, let's look after these guys. Like, they're doing so much for us. And so that's my inspiration. And sometimes, I don't know if it's rightfully so or whatever, but I get a little disheartened in that I'll see these like big things on the internet or social media, and we're going to plant 1,000,000 trees, and we're going to plant 10 million, and this and that. And I'm thinking, well, are you going to look after them all? Like,
Right.
because they have the mayor out there with a golden shovel, and they plant one, and cut the ribbon, and woo. Then they walk away, and I'm thinking, the tree's like, excuse me, could I get some water? Could you look after the mulching? And hello. And meanwhile, it's in the paper. They did all this stuff, and the trees you just kind of walk away. I hope that's not the case, but
Yeah.
Tree planting is very sexy, right? Because of all the headlines and the do-gooding that it does.
Right.
But tree maintenance goes on every day, and it's a lot of work, but it probably doesn't get the headlines that tree planting does. So,
right.
yeah,
You're
maybe,
right.
If I can boost that up a bit.
I had years ago, there was an idea, myself and others were floating around and it's along the concept of what you're talking about of if trees could talk or relay their story, but like find, it seems like every community where you go, there's an old tree like that's made it, lived long enough that it's achieved some type of honorable status, where it's just so old and big that nobody disputes its presence anymore. And in fact, it's revered. It's like, it may get a plaque. It even gets a little protection. Like it finally gets some of the credit it deserves, so to speak. But wouldn't it be cool to take people that know trees like we do and, find where these trees are in their locations across, well, even the world, because they're everywhere. And actually do the research, go back into the archives of photographs, either at the municipal offices or whatever you can do, and see if you can get a picture of that scene when it was first planted, and like, or even before the city was there, like, the tree was there before it was a city, and it somehow has made it. Wouldn't that be just a neat, and to do a little episode on each tree where you take people from that point and everything that's gone on in and around that tree's life that it has literally witnessed, and bring that to people's attention.
And how many bullets did it dodge with somebody saying like, you know what, a couple more parking lots, we could just flop it at it. Then somebody, there's always could be that one person that's like, no, let's hang on to that. It's, and like, yes, I'm totally with you. And just how many near misses it's had with removal or like a bulldozer, like backing into it or whatever, right? Like grade changes and it's surviving. It's still there to tell the story. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, with the climbing background that I have, I always thought it'd be really cool to finish it with, like basically the vision I sort of had would be like, you climb the tree, so you give people that experience of being in the tree. So there's pictures from the tree, and then you take photos from the tree itself, looking out and using modern technocracy, like simulate what it would have looked like from the canopy at that age, at that time, and then time lapse it. Here's what the tree was seeing here.
Yeah.
Now what it's seeing here. And exactly the near, the storms, the disease infestations, the construction, the wars, the explosions, the fires, whatever has all happened,
Yeah. And I think, you could even, and then you could get one of these whippersnappers to go and give the actual value of it over, with, storm runoff and oxygen and air cleaning, and put a dollar value on that tree, like, extrapolate the, over the years and say, we saved, $489,000 worth of, benefits from that, whatever. They could figure that out, right? And say, so just, you knock it down a tree, there's going to be a cost to it. Like, this is what you did. You could have wiped out $489,000 worth of benefits of that tree being there for 94 years or whatever.
Well, you bring up an important, interesting point. I'm curious what the professor would have to say about, you hear all the time. Well, or I should maybe say you don't hear all the time, but it's common practice often for construction or development say, well, we're going to have to remove these trees, but we're going to plant 5 new ones for every one we cut down. I don't think that's really a fair equation. Do you?
Not really. No, and we're going through this in Toronto with Metrolinx because they're doing like a couple of subway projects where they're they say you got to break eggs to make some omelets, right? So they have to put in stations, and when they pop up, they can't pop up where a building is, so they got to pop in a green space. What's in green space is trees. So they're
Right.
they have to cut out some trees. So again, I kind of get pulled into these things, and I don't like to be knee jerk and kind of like, because I'm like, well, give me this. Oh, they're going to plant 5 for every one or whatever taken down. And I'm like, okay, I want to see the list of species because there could be buckthorn and Manitoba maple and poplar and seriously, right? So it's like, give me, before I'm going to like really tie myself to the tree, I want to see exactly what they're talking about. So, but yeah, I know there is in fact much more value and benefit to having older trees there as opposed to younger trees. But like, I get the concept of progress and moving ahead, but I think they really, really have to tip the scales, or even like, if there's the tree's worthy, we're not going to do it for a Manitoba maple, but if there's like a really nice specimen oak tree or something of great value, why don't we move it? I see that done a lot in Europe, but I don't think we do that so much over in North America, where they do the massive ball and burlap or gunite or whatever around the tree, and they physically move it. But we don't really do that a whole lot here in North America. But I try not to do a knee jerk on these things where, just like you say, they're going to cut the old tree and put 10 in. But yeah, it's a tough thing.
It is. It's a tough one to balance out. Like, because like there currently is a bit of a heavy discussion. I remember like at the conference a few weeks ago, everyone was talking about is it at the University of Toronto where there's some discussion over some trees, and isn't it for a metro building?
Metrolinx. It's for the new subway, and it's at Osgoode Hall. It's like right downtown at like Queen and University. It's an old heritage, building. Osgoode Hall has been around a century, and some of the trees within that footprint. It's the only kind of footprint that they can possibly bring up this subway, without coming up through the bottom of a building or whatever. But yeah, that's the controversy there, and trying to balance the removals and, and I saw they did some, and one of the contractors, I'm not going to mention the name, starts with a D and rhymes with gravy. But yeah, I just kind of like, it's kind of a tough thing for them too. Like, you're there and it's a big contract, and they probably know much more than we know about what's going to be replaced and, the ethics of all that. So, but it's a really, really tough thing. It's,
so is that one tough because of the age of the trees and the species, and their historical significance, or what's, we talk about tree valuation, and, there's obviously, we assign, we've cooked up ways through the tree appraisal guide to assign monetary value to trees, particularly in urban areas. But, symbolic value and historical value is one of them. Is what aspect of value are those trees? Where do they have their highest ranking? Is it the species? Is it their placement? Is it their, symbolic or historical value?
I think it's all of that. It is symbolic. It probably gives habitat to some bird life and some wildlife. From what I understand, the biggest bulk of the species is Norway maples. So that, that's, it doesn't get a lot of points for that, but it contributes to the green canopy, right? And there's not a lot of green canopy in that particular area. So I think to lose any of it will have an impact. And you probably, again, if you plant 10 trees, like little caliper trees for every big tree that you lose, that's going to be probably 20, 30 years before things start to equal out a bit on the canopy loss.
Yeah.
So
you
there's
bet.
gonna be a big gap for a while, quite a while.
Yeah.
And then again, there's gridlock all over Toronto. There's cars downtown burning CO2 off, and these guys want to put in an electric subway system. You know, how do you win, right? How do you win?
Yeah. No, makes sense. And that, there is that side to it too, which is very beneficial, right? So I get it. And none of these, it's always easy to make comments when you're on the outside looking in, as a spectator. It's always easy to shoot people in the back,
Yeah, snipe from the hill. Yeah.
Well,
No, it's true.
I think if you take a bigger look at it too, and in this case, and it happens all the time, I think there's value in having the conversation, of that the trees do have value and that they should be compensated, and that there's more than just because 30 years ago they'd have cut them down, it wouldn't even have been a news story.
Exactly.
It had just been gone. Progress would have taken, manifest destiny would just. But I think there's value, even if the trees have to go, which is most likely going to happen, right, and be replaced by something. But at least as a society now, as a civilization, we're having that conversation where look, these plants do add value, and maybe that's one of the lessons of those trees, even though they're Norway maples. Everybody has their problems with Norway maples and invasive species, regardless of the fact that humans are the most invasive species ever. It's a little side comment, but but maybe that's one of the lessons. Maybe that's the purpose of those trees, even if they do go, is that they force that conversation, so that as a people we can take a look at how we treat trees, because we need them. Right? Everybody's looking for a solution to global warming. Well, we got one.
No, you're right.
Just to have that conversation.
You're exactly right. Probably like 25, 30 years ago, it wouldn't have been like a public forum. Well, there was no social media to roll it out there. And, a lot of these community groups would not have the traction that they have today. And, again, as you're saying, Tony, fly up above, way up high, and assess at that point. And to get cars off the streets in Toronto and that, we got to have better public transit. Break some eggs to make the omelet.
Yeah. I mean, who knows, Professor? Maybe this debate is being watched by some 12 or 13-year-old that has had the privilege to see you and understand a little bit about trees, and maybe it makes a change in their life and they take a path that they wouldn't have taken.
Let's hope.
Trees can teach us lessons in very, very many ways.
I totally agree.
And those lessons can make manifest, many years later, and grow and develop very slowly, much like the trees themselves. It was one thing I wanted to ask you, Professor, was, and I asked earlier how long you've been doing it, and we got talking about your start at Toronto Island. But what I was wanting to ask you was, you've been doing it a while now, that like if you would, think back to some of your first classes, if you will, where you've had that chance to, instill an inspirational thought about trees into a young mind, like an elementary school type mind. Have you had any, or what's the word I'm looking for, the benefit of a student or a person that's now grown up, and said, you know what? I remember you told me, like, has that happened to you yet, Professor?
Amazing story. There's a young gentleman on Toronto Island, Tyler Ganton. A shout out to Tyler, who is the owner operator of We Care Tree Care in Toronto. Wow. And Tyler, I remember Tyler when he was a young fellow, and he started out, coming around to some of the tree tours and steering them around here and there on the island, and he was doing his thing. And then I, encouraged him. I said, you know what, Tyler, you should, make sure you get your insurance. You're doing this work. And I steered him to ISA. And now he is a representative for Tree Trust on Toronto Island. So there's a perfect example of a young guy that I kind of mentored, and I guess he's kind of mentoring me now. It's funny sometimes, there's that switch, right? So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Where the teacher becomes the student.
Yes, exactly. And I watch him with these, the zigzag, polywag, MacGyver up the tree, and I'm standing there.
So what does the professor think of the future of arboriculture? Where are we headed? What's it going to look like?
Wow.
What's the future like? I mean, all we are saying is give trees a chance, but
Yeah.
how are we gonna? Are we getting better at it, or is the future bright?
Buy drones and laser systems, laser sabers and drones. And you'll be there with a little switchy thing at your belt, little toggles, and you'll be going up and doing reductions and entrenchments and return and figuring it all out from the ground with little drones. Have a good night. Oh,
Yeah.
that
Wow, that could be.
Well, you know what though? To be serious a minute, I alluded to, this group's going to plant 1,000 trees, and we're going to plant 500,000 along the 401, and then in the green belt we're going to plant 10 million trees. Somebody has to propagate those trees. Somebody has to raise them out of nursery. Somebody has to dig them. Somebody has to prune them. Somebody has to plant them. Somebody has to do assessments. Somebody has to maintain them. So again, I think there's a lot of good future in arboriculture. There's always going to be jobs in arboriculture, because now we realize what a asset they are. Their infrastructure. They're a green infrastructure. So as you guys can both speak to this, it's such a noble profession. The salt of the earth people that work in it. We tend to have everybody's back as we're working along the common goals. So that's my message to the young students is and a lot of them don't even consider, they're like, wow, you can get a job looking after trees. Like, yeah, you can get a job looking after trees. Great job. They don't talk back.
Right. It's interesting. You mentioned the propagation and growing of trees. Often it's in arboriculture, it's a separate entity or leg, and it's for example, we were recently at a conference, and there were maybe a few people from the nursery side of the industry, but not that many. There seems like there's a different disconnect there, and yet it is obviously that's where the trees come from. What's your thoughts on that? Like, is it good the way it is? Could it be improved, or why is it the way it is?
Yeah, you're right. It's like two streams almost, or two silos, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not a lot of overlap that I've witnessed over the years. I think a few of them do come to trade shows, but not as many as you'd think, because you'd think that that's who they're marketing to and who's going to connect them to the clients and whatnot. Very interesting. That's a great observation. And because we can only plant what they are supplying, so they need to hear the voice of the arborist, right tree, right place, and kind of what the demands are in the field, because a lot of them are like a wholesale kind of level. That don't have like proper garden center walk-ins. That's a good question, Dwayne. Yeah.
And it's interesting how, like, for them, it's if it's when it an old tree is a tree that's ready for sale. And for us, an old tree is a tree that's been there for 50 years or more, or 100 years.
Right. they may even discount you on an old tree just to get it moving, right? They might say, here's get it out of here. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're trying to save it, and it's big and old. So I really appreciate you joining us on the show. It's been a great interaction. Tony, I don't know if anything you want to say to the good professor in closing.
No, nothing I can think of, dude. Thank you for coming on, Professor. It's been awesome. Look forward to seeing you out and about in the future here sometime. Hope you can get down to the States at some point. I know you have before, but look forward to seeing you again. And good luck on your ride this summer.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
for the Tour de Trees.
Well, and Professor, I know you've been. Are you able? I know there's been some support thrown your way. Is that gonna allow you to spread your wings a little bit outside of the country of Canada at all, or do you know any? Have you got any? Where could someone maybe go and catch a performance potentially?
Well, early May, I'm coming out to Lethbridge in Calgary. That's right. That's a done deal. I just I get offers, and I'm sort of retired, so I'm like a fixed income fella now. So I have time to get out and about, but yeah, I'm always open to opportunities, and I want to thank you guys today for this great opportunity to reach out to your tree action audience, and it was terrific. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. And if someone wanted to invite the professor, how would they make contact to say, hey, give them an invite to attend somewhere? How could they do that?
Well, first of all, probably best to go through my website. It's pricklethorn.com, Prickle Thorn.com. So that's probably the easiest. There's email there. You can get a real sense of what the presentation is about on there. And I'm open to, was over in France and was in Paris doing it. So I was in Austin and San Antonio in November, Calgary coming up, I think Buffalo coming up.
Nice.
Let's spread the word.
That's awesome. Well, if anyone out there interested in getting the professor out, so you know where to get a hold of him at pricklethorn.com is his website. And I've seen it more than once. I've always, I'm usually at a conference traveling from one thing to the next or moving from one room to another, but more than one time I've had to make pause to just take it in and grab a seat in the back of the room or wherever you're presenting it and listen to it. And it's definitely worth a cast if anyone ever gets a chance, and it's worth bringing them out to your event. So this is Dwayne Newstater with Professor Pricklethorn coming at you from Tree Actions, and we hope to see y'all somewhere in person. I hope you enjoyed the show.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, Professor.